The words sad and dinosaur don't really fit in the same sentence for some people, since most think they're just big lizards that kill each other, which I guess is fair since majority of the population that has any sort of knowledge of these animals gets it from gory movies or series. And while you could argue that most dinosaur deaths aren't sad, you can't convince me that a lot aren't at least unfair. The deaths in this video might be sad for most of us, but I'm not really leaning towards that. I'm more targeting the unfair deaths in dinosaur movies and, believe it or not, a documentary. How did I come up with this, you may ask? Some of these video ideas come from you guys, while the rest randomly pop up in my head when I fall asleep while writing these scripts. From a tyrannosaur that was almost sexually assaulted and still died not too long after, to an old gem that was robbed of his adulthood. We're going to be taking a look at some of the most unfair dinosaur deaths in cinema. And if you want to see more stuff like this, then hit that subscribe button and join the Discord down below. Also, follow me on TikTok, since I'll start posting short form content over there soon. With the promo finally finished, let's get into it, shall we? The Jurassic franchise has seen many villains come and go, and a few had relatively sad deaths, but none in my opinion had a more unfair passing than the franchise's Giganotosaurus. Zeb along with Disney's Carno are the only dinosaurs I've seen act somewhat like normal animals. They weren't pressed on going out of their way to cause destruction or carnage, even though they could, and very easily by the way. Zeb was the largest theropod in the franchise along with the Spinosaurus at more than 15 meters and over 10 tons. Unlike the Spinosaurus, he was another T-Rex killer, perhaps an even better one. Well, his predecessor was at least. The director specifically said that this animal was meant to be like the Joker, which I assume means he's supposed to be a mass murderer or a psychotic animal. But almost all the shots of this guy are just him trying to chill. I'm not saying he was peaceful or a good dinosaur per se, because he did try to eat people near the end of the movie, but he didn't go nearly as hard as the other megatheropods, and from his perspective they were food, and since the only things he could really eat in Biosyn Valley were deer, his options were kinda limited, compared to the others who would kill humans just for the sake of killing humans. One of which hates our species so much that it might be considered racial at this point. In the last minutes of the movie he was doing his thing until he had to fight Rexy, which is fine, he defeated her and basically killed her. What happens next is the part that had a lot of people upset, which I understand. Look, it would have been fine in my opinion if Rexy somehow beat the guy up front in a 1v1. Even though it would still be outrageous, it will still be better than the way Zeb died in the movie. Why in the world was Rexy able to basically rise from the dead and tag team him with the Therizinosaurus? How? Just how? The Therizinosaurus just propped up its claws and Rexy got the cue to push him into them when he was distracted, killing him almost instantly. The movie didn't even show the interaction after. All they did was a roar and some lightning flashed in the background. Then the scene cuts. We don't know how Rexy or the Theri interacted after. At least it showed that Blue and Rexy had an understanding after the first movie. Could you imagine basically doing a confirmed kill and then another big player pops up to challenge you for no reason, just for the thing you thought you put down to rise from the grave with the power of plot armor? The very first scene of Zeb was him taking a snooze in the woods, and the next was him taking a deer carcass from Rexy. He didn't try to fight to the death or kill her outright, which he could have done. He just bit her on the nose and took the deer carcass. If anything, Rexy was the one who started the fight at the end. She decided she wanted all the smoke and Zeb was forced to fight. Granted, this fight would have likely happened regardless due to how little food was available in Biosyn Valley, because two megatheropods can't survive off of deer. I'm not trying to make Rexy seem like a bad character because she is the face of the franchise. As a matter of fact, it would have never been as good as it was if she wasn't in it. But sometimes they make her perform out of the blue miracles that, just shouldn't happen. Zeb unfortunately was a victim of one of those miracles in quotation marks, a guy who had a kill count of 0 during the entire film, and was just trying to survive the best way he could in that environment, but due to plot armor he had to be killed off with the most random carnivore and herbivore duo in the franchise. Next up is perhaps the only dinosaur character in existence that could match Speckles in terms of suffering. If you've been watching me for a while, then you basically know everything about him and how miserable his existence was from childhood to adulthood. He's the guts of dinosaurs basically. I'm not going to go over his entire story or the lore of Dino King. If you want, you could watch these videos for a more in-depth review. In short, Speckles is a Tarbosaurus whose entire family was killed in front of him by a crazed Tyrannosaurus Rex called One Eye, who was the bane of his life for almost 20 years, and killing even more members of his family in the future. However, during adolescence he met up with another Tarbosaurus who could go band for band in terms of suffering, which honestly just sounds depressing. Blue Eyes and Speckles met after Speckles snagged a piece of meat while One Eye was distracted by Blue Eyes, and as he was about to eat in the cupboard, she showed up and began eating his food. At first he was annoyed but noticed all the scars and open wounds on her body, indicating that she had it as rough as Speckles at this point in time. Eventually the two grew up and had hatchlings of their own, but this was sadly short-lived. If the first and second movies anything to go off of, Tarbosaurs in this universe usually stay together until sub-adulthood or at least the late juvenile stage, yet Blue Eyes was alone, which means that her parents could have been killed or she was just simply abandoned in the nest after the eggs were laid. Who knows? Whatever the reason, she had to spend most of her younger years scavenging and trying her best to survive. Now this is sad, but after she meets Speckles, her suffering just becomes unfair. During the time of their companionship, Blue Eyes has gotten beaten up more times than Speckles, and almost went through an ordeal that would have scarred a younger me. At 10 years old, when they met One Eye once again, she got bodied by the T-Rex while Speckles didn't receive a scratch. I'm not saying Speckles was a coward, by the way, he has bigger balls than every theropod out there. But at a time when he was still significantly smaller and inexperienced, he was fearful and tried to use his brain. But the fact that he got Blue Eyes first was nefarious work. It goes from 0 to 100 real quick though during the next interaction. After One Eye pushed a boulder over a ledge and knocked Speckles into a lake, he came down to fight Blue Eyes. Or at least that's what a 12-year-old me thought. But it turns out that he was there to forcibly inseminate her. The narration itself said that he was there looking for a mate. And the more Blue Eyes resisted, the more she got ragdolled. She was bitten repeatedly and eventually thrown to the floor. Even when Speckles comes back up to help at first, she catches another stray when trying to help him. This time she was straight up knocked out. Eventually, after seeing this, Speckles locked in and beat the crap out of One Eye. After this interaction, they headed back to Speckles' original home and had 4 chicks. At this point, you'd be thinking that things were starting to look good, but nope. A massive volcano erupted, causing every dinosaur, including them, to run to somewhere safe. As they were running through the cave, Blue Eyes got her bones broken by a massive boulder trying to save her son Junior. Even when they escaped the cave, things didn't get better. With broken bones and internal bleeding, Blue Eyes just couldn't continue. Despite the pleas of her children and Speckles to get up, she couldn't muster the strength, and basically tells Speckles to take their kids to safety and leave her there because there were hundreds of raptors in the valley. So moments later, Blue Eyes died and we see the Dromaeosaurus swarm over her body and begin to feed. What makes her death unfair is all the suffering she went through. You'd think that after surviving on her own most of her childhood, getting beat up and then almost assaulted, she would get to experience the rest of her life with happiness and grow up with her kids, like Speckles' mom. But sadly, she was yet another important member of Speckles' family that was taken for plot, even getting replaced in the second movie by this Tarbosaurus. Speckles has every right to move on, but damn. I'm sure she did have happy moments since both her and Speckles lived together for more than 10 years, but to be born into suffering just to die in it again is crazy work. Okay, so she honestly isn't supposed to be on the list, and her death to me at least wasn't sad. It's just so random. The first hybrid shown to us and the most powerful theropod the franchise has produced so far, an intelligent animal that was able to outsmart both humans and dinosaurs alike, killing anything she came across in the island without remorse. Her pride was the one thing that was driving her on. Raised in isolation, she thought that she was the biggest and baddest thing out there. I mean, she was, but you get what I mean. She would go out to fight and kill anything in her path, and almost accomplished killing Rexy at the end as well, until Blue came in and saved her. After the pair teamed up on the hybrid and threw her onto the floor, the Indominus still had some fight left in her because she was just as injured as Rexy at that point, and who knows what could have happened if they weren't interrupted. She could have just been killed, or she could have managed to kill or at least injure Rexy to the point where the old Rex dies from her injuries later. But I guess we'll never know, because the directors decided to end her in yet again another random and unlikely way. Was this scene cool? Yes, to this day it's the most hardcore thing I've ever seen in the last 3 movies, but boy was it random. What were the odds that the Mosasaurus would jump out of the lagoon suddenly and land a direct hit on the hybrid to drag her to the depths? I could be wrong, but theoretically couldn't the Mosasaurus just do the same jump when all the people were running around when the Pterosaurus broke out? Regardless of the reason, I still think the Indominus was robbed. Even though she likely could have died fighting the other 2 dinosaurs, she still did have some chance of killing them later on, but I guess that's something we will simply never get to find out. Okay, so this one isn't from a movie or a series, it's straight up from a documentary that almost all of you have seen. This one's going to be a bit controversial because this is based off a real animal. There isn't much emotion and Mother Nature doesn't really care about all that anyway, but I still think Big Al had an unfair death. Well, at least in the documentary Ballad of Big Al. Because the truth is that even though we have an amazing portrayal of what his life could have looked like, it was just a speculative reconstruction of his life, since there's no reel for anyone to know how a dinosaur lived exactly from birth to death over the span of years. But in the documentary, his death was still sad. Big Al started off as all Allosaurs do, born in a clutch and guarded by their mother until he was a juvie, where he survived off the occasional lizard, unaware dryosaur, or just scavenging. And as he got older, he began to hunt more substantial prey, including Apatosaurus with all the Allosaurs. It wasn't really a pack thing, since all of the Allos gathered there to hunt, and after they fed, all went their separate ways. Al did have some ups and downs like all animals, but nothing compared to what he was about to experience in a few years. At 6 years old, Al was at the age where he began to feel the urge, but did not have anyone to talk about the birds and the bees. But nature has its own way of easing each species into the process. But unlike the Carnotaurus in Prehistoric Planet, he didn't quite have as much riz and couldn't take no for an answer. After he saw a female, he kept pestering her even though she wasn't interested. She was decently larger than Al, and when the young Allosaurus got too close, she threw him to the ground, smashed his ribs and tore his arm. Somehow he was able to survive this for a good while, which goes to show his willpower to survive. After 5 months, we see Al trying to ambush some Gyrosaurs. He has done this hundreds of times before, so it should have not been a big deal. But unfortunately for our boy, the terrain wouldn't allow him to carry out what was supposed to be an average hunt. When one of the dryos were running, it knocked over a dead tree which caused Al to trip and break his middle toe. For a carnivore, no matter how strong, being unable to effectively hunt is almost always a death sentence, especially in the dry season. Due to lack of food, his body couldn't effectively heal his injury, and the limp has gotten far worse, due to his foot now being infected, which caused him immense amounts of pain. The next and last time we see him is when some baby allosaurs found his body on a dried up riverbed. And so was the end of perhaps the most popular dinosaur specimen out there aside from Sue. Al was big but not fully grown. Despite this, his name still holds up, as his will to survive was bigger than any dinosaur specimen we found so far. With over 18 noticeable injuries on his body, including the healed over ribs that were broken, and a severe infection on his toe, he lived through what most real animals couldn't. And like I said, some won't really find it sad because this film wasn't a fictional movie, it was a documentary of Big Al's hypothetical death. After all, dying in the wild is something that happens all the time and isn't often fear. A lot of animals die the moment they exit the egg or are born, but Big Al's death just hits different for me. Maybe it's the nostalgia, or just the way how Walking with Dinosaurs portrayed it. Whatever the reason is, it still is to this day my favorite dinosaur documentary ever, no matter how much more accurate the no documentaries are. And even if you don't find it sad, you gotta admit, his death was low-key unfair. I mean, he's done this all the time, but a Dryosaurus in front of him knocked over a dead tree which caused Big Al to trip and break his toe. The Walking With series will always hold a special place in my heart, due to just how well each episode was showcasing the lives of these animals, and even giving some personalities, even though the information isn't that accurate compared to what we know now. I haven't rewatched the remake yet, I might this week, but from what a lot of people are saying, it's accurate but does not capture the essence of the original. However, I won't know unless I watch it myself. But yeah folks, that's gonna be it for this one. If this video gets more than 3,000 likes, I'll do a part 2. And leave in the comments which dinosaurs you think had the most unfair deaths. By the way, I'm gonna leave a little Bible verse here for you guys to help push you through this weekend if you're feeling down. With that said, enjoy your weekend folks. I'll see you Monday.